Hmm. It's something nobody tells you about getting older. It's not the bad knees. It's not the way you need reading glasses for everything now, even the cereal box in the morning. It's not even the silence in a house that used to be full of noise. Kids running down the hallway, a dog barking at nothing, a wife humming in the kitchen. No, the thing nobody tells you about getting older is this. The people you spent your whole life protecting are sometimes the very ones you need protecting from. My name is Harold. I am 71 years old. I spent 34 years building a landscaping and property maintenance company from nothing. From a single used truck, a second-hand mower, and a handshake with a neighbor who needed his lawn done before his daughter's wedding. I built that company with early mornings and late evenings and dirt under my fingernails every single day. I built it in the heat of Georgia summers and the rare cold snaps of January. I built it while raising a son mostly on my own after my wife, Carol, passed from ovarian cancer when our boy was only 9 years old. I did not build it for myself. I built it for him. His name is Marcus. He is 43 years old. And I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened. I want you to understand that I loved that boy more than I have ever loved anything in this world. More than the company. More than the house. More than whatever years I might have left. I need you to understand that because what comes next is going to be hard to hear. And I think it will only make sense if you know how much I gave and how willingly I gave it. Marcus was a quiet kid. Serious. Good in school. He had Carol's eyes. Dark brown, almost black in certain light, and her way of tilting his head slightly when he was thinking hard about something. After Carol died, it was just the two of us in that house in Decatur, and I made sure he never felt the absence of everything we lost. I coached his Little League team. I showed up to every school play, every graduation, every ceremony. I taught him how to drive in the parking lot of a church on a Sunday morning. I taught him how to shake a man's hand and look him in the eye. I taught him that your word is the only currency that never loses value. When Marcus was 26, he met Vanessa at a work conference in Atlanta. She was sharp, ambitious, well-dressed. She had opinions about everything, and she was not shy about sharing them. I noticed at dinner the first time Marcus brought her home that she asked me very few questions about myself, but paid close attention when I talked about the business. I told myself that was just her personality, that some people are listeners and some people are calculators. I told myself that was fine. They got married 2 years later. I paid for most of the wedding. For a while, things were good. Marcus started working with me at the company around that time, coming in part-time at first, then full-time. He was capable, organized, better with numbers than I had ever been. I started to genuinely believe that my dream of handing something real to my son was going to come true. I started to believe that all those early mornings had been worth it in a way I would get to see with my own eyes. I should have paid closer attention to the shift. But when you want something to be true badly enough, you see what you want to see. It started small. Comments at dinner about how the business could be restructured. Suggestions from Vanessa about bringing in outside investors. A tone in Marcus's voice when he disagreed with my decisions at work. Not the tone of a partner offering input, but something cooler than that. Something that made me feel like a tenant in my own building. I let it go each time. I told myself he was just growing into his own as a businessman. I told myself that was healthy. Then, about 2 years ago, the conversations became direct. We were sitting at my kitchen table. The same table where Marcus had done his homework as a boy, where we had eaten every Thanksgiving, where I had sat alone the night Carol died, and not moved for 6 hours. And Marcus slid a folder across to me. "Dad," he said, "I think it's time we made this official." Inside the folder was a proposed agreement. Marcus would take over full ownership of the company. I would receive a monthly payment, a modest one, the kind that made me feel like a child getting an allowance, and I would retain the house. That was it. Everything I had built, 34 years of it, in exchange for staying in my own home and receiving a check each month that would barely cover my expenses. I looked at the folder for a long time. Then I looked at my son. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "Vanessa helped me draft it," he said. "We've been talking about it for a while." I asked him what a while meant. He said a few months. I asked him why he hadn't talked to me first. He said he was talking to me now. I pushed the folder back across the table. "I'm not ready to retire," I told him. "And when I am, we'll have a real conversation. Together. Not like this." Marcus picked up the folder without another word. He tucked it under his arm and left. Vanessa was waiting for him in the car. She had not come inside. I stood at the window and watched them drive away, and I felt something I had not felt since the day Carol died. A kind of hollow quiet, like the air had changed in a room you thought you knew. I want to be honest with you. After that night, things moved slowly. There were weeks when everything seemed almost normal. Marcus still came to work. We still had dinner occasionally. But something had been said that could not be unsaid. The folder existed. The calculation existed. And I began to notice things I had trained myself not to notice before. Marcus started copying Vanessa on business emails. Vanessa, who had no role in the company, no title, no stake. She began attending meetings she had no reason to attend. Small things went missing from my office. Not stolen, just relocated. Files I kept in certain places, suddenly in other places. A kind of slow, patient reorganization. Like someone measuring a space for new furniture before the current occupant is left. I talked to my attorney about it. His name is Raymond, and we've been friends for going on 20 years. He listened carefully, and then told me that what I was describing was not illegal, but that I should get my affairs formally documented. Updated will. Updated power of attorney. He offered to draw up the paperwork whenever I was ready. I told him I would think about it. I did not move fast enough. It was a Tuesday in October. I remember because the leaves on the oak tree in the backyard had just started to turn, and I had been planning to take photographs of them the way Carol used to every fall. Marcus and Vanessa had come over that evening, which was not unusual. Marcus still had a key. We sat in the living room. Vanessa had brought a bottle of wine I didn't ask for. The conversation was polite for about 20 minutes, and then Marcus set his glass down and said, "Dad, we need to talk about the house." Vanessa began speaking before I could respond. She talked for a long time. She talked about equity and liquidity and how sitting in a house this size at my age was not a financially sound decision. She talked about an assisted living community in Marietta that was very well reviewed. She talked about how the proceeds from selling the house, combined with a buyout from the company, would give me real security. She said the word security 4 times. She did not look at me while she talked. She looked at her hands or at a spot just past my shoulder. When she finished, I sat quietly for a moment. Then I said, "I am not selling this house. I am not moving to Marietta or anywhere else, and I am not having this conversation again." Vanessa looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at me and said very calmly, "Dad, you're not being reasonable." I told him I was being very reasonable. I told him this was my home, and it would remain my home for as long as I was alive. What happened next happened quickly. Marcus stood up. There was something in his face I did not recognize. Not anger exactly. Something more deliberate than anger. He said, "Then we need to do this a different way." He took a document from inside his jacket. A different document than the folder from 2 years ago, but the same idea, expanded. Transfer of property. Transfer of business assets. Sign here, and here, and here. I told him to leave. He moved toward me. Not fast. Slowly, like he had decided something and was following through on the decision. He put the document on the coffee table and he said very quietly, "Sign it, Dad." Very quietly. "Sign it, Dad. Just sign it and we can all move on." I stood up. I am 71 years old and I am not a small man, but Marcus is 6 feet 2, and in that moment the room felt very different than it had a minute before. I said, "I want you to leave my house." He put his hand on my arm. I pulled away. And then Vanessa said something from behind me, from where she had moved without my noticing. She said very quietly, almost gently, "Marcus, he's not going to sign anything tonight." There was a pause, and then Marcus said, "Then maybe it's time he understood what his options really are." I do not know exactly what happened in the next few seconds. I was turning toward the hallway. There was a push. I felt both hands flat on my back, deliberate and hard. I went forward. I could not catch myself. I hit the edge of the hallway side table, and then the floor, and the pain that went through my left side was the kind of pain that takes your breath completely. I lay there on the hard wood, and I heard Vanessa say from somewhere above me, "That was an accident." Marcus said nothing. I heard their footsteps. I heard the front door. I heard it close. I lay on the floor of my own hallway in the dark, and I breathed very carefully because each breath sent fire through my left side. I did not know yet that I had 2 cracked ribs and the hairline fracture in my wrist. I only knew that I was alone and that my son had just walked out, and that outside the window the oak tree was turning colors and no one was going to take photographs of it. I want to tell you something about that moment on the floor. I was afraid. I will not pretend otherwise. I was 71 years old and I was alone, and I was hurt, and the person who should have been the first call I made was the person who had just walked out the front door. But I also felt something else. Something underneath the fear. Quieter and steadier. I had built something real. 34 years of something real. And no one, not my son, not his wife, not anyone, was going to take it by standing over me while I was on the floor. I reached into my pocket. I called Raymond. He answered on the 3rd ring. I told him what had happened. My voice was very calm. I do not know how it was calm, but it was. I told him I was on the floor, I was hurt, I needed to go to the hospital, and before I did anything else, I needed him to come to my house. He said, "Harold, I'm coming right now." My neighbor, a woman named Dottie who has lived 3 houses down for 15 years and who has brought me a casserole every Christmas since Carol died, had seen Marcus and Vanessa leave in a hurry. She had seen the way they walked to the car. She had already started toward my house when Raymond's called a 911. He called before he even left his driveway, sent 2 paramedics up my front walk. I was at the hospital for 2 days. Cracked ribs, fractured wrist, bruising along my left hip. The emergency room doctor, a young woman who could not have been more than 35, asked me 3 times in different ways whether I wanted to file an assault report. I told her I was considering my options. She looked at me steadily and said, "Sir, someone did this to you." I told her I understood that. Raymond was at the hospital before midnight. He sat in the chair next to my bed, and he put his briefcase on his knees, and he said, "Tell me everything." I told him everything. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Harold, I need you to understand something. What Marcus and Vanessa did tonight is not just a family dispute. What you've described, the documents, the pattern of behavior, the physical contact, this is elder abuse. That's a legal term with legal consequences, and I want you to let me help you." I said, "Raymond, update my will, tonight if possible." He smiled. He said, "Already pulled it up on the drive over." We worked for 3 hours that night in my hospital room. Raymond drafted a new will. He updated the power of attorney, removing Marcus entirely and transferring it to a trust administered by Raymond himself and Dottie, who had driven to the hospital and was sitting in the waiting room with a thermos of coffee in the quiet, steady presence of someone who understands that being a good neighbor sometimes means showing up at midnight. I also, and this is the part I want you to pay close attention to, I also gave Raymond formal authorization to notify the county police of the assault and to file a report on my behalf. He had already documented my injuries with photographs at the hospital. He had already begun the paperwork. I want to be clear. Marcus and Vanessa did not think I would do this. I know this because of what happened 3 days later, when I came home from the hospital and Marcus arrived at the house. He still had his key, apparently expecting to find things as he had left them. What he found instead was Raymond's car in the driveway, and a county sheriff's deputy's car behind it. I was sitting in my own living room, in my own chair, with my wrist in a brace and a cup of coffee in my good hand. Marcus stopped in the doorway. Vanessa stopped behind him. Raymond said, "Marcus, come in. We have some things to discuss." I want to tell you exactly what Marcus's face looked like in that moment, but I find I don't have the right words for it. It was not quite the face of someone surprised. It was more the face of someone who had been certain of something and had just discovered their certainty was built on sand. The deputy informed Marcus and Vanessa that a formal complaint had been filed, that an investigation was open, that they were required to vacate the property immediately as it was not their residence, that any further contact with me that was not conducted through legal counsel would be considered harassment. Vanessa began to say something about how I had fallen. The deputy looked at her very calmly and said, "Ma'am, that's something for the investigation to determine." They left. The door closed. Raymond put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You doing all right?" I said. "Ask me in a month." In the weeks that followed, the investigation moved forward. The pattern of behavior, the emails, the documents, The pressure campaign, combined with my medical records and Raymond's documentation, gave investigators what they needed. Both Marcus and Vanessa were charged with elder abuse and battery. The charges were serious, the kind that do not simply disappear. My updated will is airtight. The company, which I spent 34 years building, will pass to a trust that will be managed by a board I appointed, with instructions to employ and support the 16 full-time workers who have been with me for years. People with families and mortgages and kids in school. People who showed up. Marcus is not named in the will. He will not receive the company. He will not receive the house. He will not receive what he tried to take. Dottie still brings a casserole at Christmas. Raymond still calls me on Sunday mornings. The oak tree in the backyard went from green to gold to bare, and now there are small buds on it again because that is what trees do. They keep going whether you are paying attention or not. I have thought a lot about what I would say if Marcus ever asked me why I did not simply give him what he wanted. I have thought about it while sitting in this house that I built a life inside, this house where Carol hummed in the kitchen, and a boy grew up at the table in the hall. Here is what I think I would say. I would say a man does not spend 34 years building something real so that it can be taken from him by someone who stopped being patient. I would say the floor of my own hallway in the dark was not the end of my story. I would say the moment you pushed me, you did not push me out of your way. You pushed yourself out of my life. And I would say this, which I mean with every year I have left. There is a difference between the people who build things and the people who wait to inherit them. I have always been a builder. That did not stop on the floor of my hallway. That did not stop in a hospital bed. That did not stop at 71. And God willing, it does not stop for a long time yet. The single best thing I have ever done, better than the company, better than any contract I ever signed, was reaching into my pocket on that floor and making one phone call to a man I trusted. Everything else followed from that. If you are sitting somewhere tonight and there is someone in your life who is counting on you not to make that call, make it. Do not wait until you feel ready. Do not wait until things get worse. Do not wait until the floor is the only thing beneath you. Make the call. I wish I had made it sooner.